head of school, Mrs. Zipporah Shaw, head of senior school, Mrs. Rachel Levitt Klein, friends. What an enormous privilege it is to join you in this incredible school. Amazing pupils. I have to tell you this because I got a series of questions from a senior school, and I've never had such impressive questions from anyone. I'm just so glad I didn't have to face questions like that when I was a chief rabbi. We'll have a go today. But you are so blessed to have a rabbi like Rabbi Waldberg, who has tended and made this community grow with such eloquence and distinction and power and vision for so many years. And we wish you mazel tov on your birthday, and at the very least another 50 years of health and strength. At 120 you get the option, but until then you should just be well and continue to be a blessing. And pupils, you are the most important people here, and it's a privilege for Elaine and myself to be with you. I just want to tell you a very little story, which is just incredibly powerful. Tomorrow we're going to read the Parsha of Vayera, and it contains one of the most moving and touching scenes in the Torah. Abraham has just had a bris. I have to tell you, when you're 99 and you have a bris, it can be quite painful. He's sitting there at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. And it's an odd sequence of verses. It says, God appeared to him, and then he lifted up his eyes and saw 3 men. And then he said, God, don't go away, don't pass away, don't go away. And on this, the rabbis constructed an extraordinary principle. They said, God appeared to Abraham. But before God could say anything, God doesn't speak until the middle of the chapter. Abram saw 3 passers-by and said to Hashem, Hashem, please don't go away, but I have a mitzvah to do first. The mitzvah of, what do we call that? Hachnosas Orachim. Exactly. Being hospitable to strangers, to passers-by. And Abram said to Hashem, please stay, because first I have to do the mitzvah of Hachnasat Orachim, of welcoming and saying hello to strangers. And from this, the rabbis learned the rule. G'dolah Hachnasat Orachim mikabalat pnei Shechina. It is a greater mitzvah to be kind and hospitable to visitors, which you've done to Elaine and myself this morning. I have to say, you fulfill the mitzvah, every one of you. That even welcoming the divine presence itself. And I read a story some years ago, set not very far from here in Washington. And here is the story. It concerns an African American called Stephen Carter, who years later told the story of how, when he was 11, in 1961, he and his family moved to be the first black family in an exclusively white neighborhood in Washington. It was a long time ago, 1961. And he describes what it felt like the first day, the first morning after their move. He sat at the front of the steps to the house with his brothers and sisters. He said, we waited to see how we would be welcomed. Now this is a long time ago. This is Martin Luther King times. And he writes, we weren't. Nobody welcomed us. Nobody said a word to us. Nobody even looked at us. And he says, as I was sitting there, I was thinking to myself, we shouldn't have come here. We shouldn't have moved here. We will never belong here. He said, as I was thinking those thoughts, my eye was caught by a lady on the other side of the road who was walking down the road, her arms laden with shopping. And she gave us a big smile. And then she disappeared into her house over the road and came out 5 minutes later with a big tray of cookies and drinks, and came over to my brothers and sisters and myself and said, welcome, how wonderful to have you here. He said that day changed my life. It taught me that I could belong here, that an African American had a place here. Stephen Carter is now professor of law at Yale University, and he ends this story by saying, it is probably no accident that that lady, whose name was Sarah Kestenbaum, was a Jewish lady and a religious lady. He said, because Jews have a word for this kind of thing. They call it chesed, which means kindness, especially to strangers, and especially when it's hard. That act changed my life. Many years later, I told that story in a shul in Washington, and people said to me, oh, did you know Sarah Kestenbaum was a member here? I said, no, I didn't know. And they said, well, we didn't know that story, but yes, that's the kind of thing Sarah Kestenbaum used to do. Now the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva, chapter 3, halacha 4, says something really incredible. I want you to think about this. He says, we are judged by the majority of our deeds. So if the majority of our deeds are good, we're written for good. And if they're bad, bad things happen to us. And the same is true about a town, and the same is true about a country, and the same is true about the world. And then he says, Leficha, sarich adam lirot et atzmo kol yom. Therefore, every single day we should think that the world is evenly balanced. My life is evenly balanced. And my next act could change the balance of my life and the balance of the world. Now, Hebrew, go figure. You are going to grow up and go out into the world, and how many people in the world right now? A lot, yeah, exactly. Around 7 billion, okay? So you think to yourself, there's only one of me, and there's 7 billion people out there. What difference can I make? My life is no more than a wave in the ocean, a grain of sand on the seashore, dust on the surface of infinity. And here is the Rambam, here a Chazal telling me my next act could change the world. Now I sometimes think to myself, did Sarah Kestenbaum know that that one act of Haknosis Orachim would change the life of this young man? She didn't know. We never know. And yet it did. And if we believe, as we truly believe, that Nefesh Achat Ka'olam Malei, as it says in the Mishnah in Sanhedrin chapter 4, one life is like a universe, then how do you change the universe? If you change one life, you have begun to change the universe. In the only way we ever can. One life at a time, one day at a time, one act at a time. And that is how Haknasot Orachim can be greater than Kabbalat Pnei Shechina. Have a look when you get back at Bereshis 18 and Bereshis 19. In Bereshis 18, 3 visitors come to Abraham. In Bereshis 19, 2 visitors come to Lot, his nephew. But there's a difference. In Bereshis 18, they're called men. In chapter 19, when they come to Lot, they're called angels. And that is the difference. Abraham saw men and treated them like angels. Lot met angels and treated them like men. I want you, starting really now, when you have the opportunity to do an act of kindness, especially when it's hard, take that opportunity. You never know when one act of kindness by you might change someone's life and help to change the world. May you grow up and change the world for better. And I thank the Jewish people that it has young people like you. Thank you very much indeed.
wonderful and very much a reflection of who we are. We're going to be meeting with our teachers and our administrators. As a teacher of teachers, Rabbi Sacks has a great deal to share with us as teachers, and ultimately, we are all teachers. As morim, as horim, as parents and teachers, the word morim and the word horim have the same root. As parents, we teach, but as teachers, we parent. And so it's going to be our honor to spend time with the rabbi as he's going to help us in the way we parent you and teach you simultaneously. Remember this moment, please, because it is a monumental moment in your lives. And I am hoping that you take the words of the Rav to heart, and indeed, the very next act you do, the chesed that you do, will change the world. Shabbat Shalom.
All right, we're going to have our thank yous and our announcements, and I thank the teachers for coming